Brilliant. Good morning on this very, very sunny Wednesday, wherever you are. I'm down south on the coast in Hastings, and it is absolutely glorious outside. So I hope everyone loves the sun as much as I do, because it definitely makes me smile. Welcome to this 1-hour live webinar on running your own inclusive careers event. Today is a how-to webinar on promoting positive career pathways for young people with special educational needs and disabilities. Now, as a way of introduction, my name is Henrietta Vallastil, or most people just know me as Henny. I'm joined today by the wonderful Kim Bolgen, who is a project officer within my team, and I'll talk about that in a very short moment. Kim Bolgen worked closely with me on the ICANN Careers event, and that event is the event which I will introduce to you a little bit later in this webinar. So she really is and truly is the best person to support me on this webinar. So if you have any questions during the webinar, you can add that into the sidebar, and we'll revisit those at the end of this webinar. If you'd like those to stay anonymous, please do say, and either Kim or my other colleagues that are monitoring the Q&A will keep those out of the public domain. Fabulous. So before we begin, a little bit more about me. So my role is that of an enterprise coordinator in the East Sussex Careers Hub, and I have a particular focus or specialism in SEND, and I'm going to be using that term SEND quite a lot, special educational needs and disabilities. And our teams sit within Children's Services at the local authority, East Sussex County Council. And I actually have a dual role in that I work both as an enterprise coordinator with the Careers and Enterprise Company, which is funded by the Department for Education. And I work closely with our internal iSend team to work with supported employment providers across the county, and more closely in ensuring that employment pathways for young people with SEND both exist and are being developed in this region. So if you're a little bit unsure about the Careers and Enterprise Company, they were established in 2015 to help link schools and colleges to employers in order to increase employer engagement for young people. So our role really is to link schools and colleges to employers and to help them deliver world-class career support for all young people. And we do that in a few ways. So one of those is building networks, linking schools and colleges to employers and other external careers providers through the Enterprise Advisor Network and the Careers Hub. And so I'm part of an East Sussex Careers Hub. We also do that by supporting careers leaders that are designated in schools and colleges. So we provide training, support for careers leaders, and we also back the implementation of the Gatsby benchmarks. And those really are the best practice and standard for careers support. And the Gatsby benchmarks with tools and targeted funding are how we support all of our schools and colleges in our region. And it's done slightly differently in different areas. And if you'd like to find out more about how we're working in East Sussex, then feel free to email me. My email's on that slide now. So that's a little introduction into the context of my role, and potentially apart from my personal passions, which really is about this whole topic that we're talking about and drive, it's why we're here today on this webinar. So we're here today to hopefully gain a sense of inspiration and encouragement to run a careers event that is tailored to the needs of young people with SEND. So any career event that you are running or facilitating should always be mindful of what positive career pathways can look like for the SEND cohort. So over the next hour, I'm going to introduce you to the definition of SEND and give you some practical tips of how you may want to run a careers fair or an event that is as inclusive as possible. So I will be talking to you about a careers event that took place in January just gone 2020 as the exemplar of how young people and inclusivity were and are at the centre of any planning and delivery of careers events. So all the photos that you're going to be seeing on the slides today are all from this very bespoke ICANN careers event that took place in January 2020. So who can benefit from this webinar? I did send out a little survey monkey. I wanted to gauge that this was pitched in the right way, that we had a variety of people joining, and we really do, which is so exciting. I know that we're joined today by supported employment managers, enterprise coordinators, business owners, career guidance practitioners, and transition coordinators, to name a few. So we all have a part to play in this very key moment in how we can change careers education and those positive outcomes for young people with SEND. The survey that I sent out also requested that you all wanted to hear about everything SEND related, best practices, inspiration ideas, practical information, different approaches, and a better understanding of SEND. So I've hopefully encompassed all of those things that you asked for in the Survey Monkey in today's webinar. So I will be using the term SEND throughout, as I mentioned, and it is, of course, an abbreviation. And understanding the SEND cohort in your region and area is particularly key when thinking about planning any events, especially as one young person that identifies as having SEND is going to be extremely different to another young person with SEND. And I really love that phrase or saying that once you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So it is the all-encompassing approach that I took towards planning ICANN that we will unpack today. So this definition here is widely or nationally recognised. It's from the SEND Code of Practice, which was last updated in 2015. And this, of course, is a very common term, but it's also very common for young people with SEND to have multiple barriers from more than one grouping. So a child with or young person with SEND, if they have a learning difficulty or disability which calls for special educational provision to be made for him or her, a child of compulsory school age or a young person has a learning difficulty or disability if he or she has a disability which hinders him or her from making use of facilities that somebody or another young person may be accessing in a mainstream school or mainstream post-16 institutions. The SEND Code of Practice also breaks down this term even further into 4 broad groupings. So the first one is communication and interaction. So that's all about speech and language and communication needs. And often you'll find a young person with ASD or autistic spectrum disorder fitting within that grouping. Then you've got cognition and learning, which is about kind of specific learning difficulties, to moderate to severe learning difficulties, or PMLD, profound and multiple learning difficulties. Then you've got SEMH, which is social, emotional and mental health. So often you'll find a lot of young people with SEMH in a variety of educational establishments, but often more than not in pupil referral units or alternative provision. And lastly, the 4th grouping, physical needs, which includes visual impairment, hearing, multisensory. So hopefully that gives you a sense of when we say the term SEND, it's a lot broader and there's a lot more complexities within that. So this is a really great overview of where young people with SEND are educated. And this actually has come from the work that Talentino, a lovely national organisation, if you haven't heard of them, do so, go and look them up. Talentino are working strategically with the Careers and Enterprise Company. So they actually put this together, but I thought it was a really great overview to include in today's webinar because it gives us a sense of young people being educated in multiple educational settings. We're not just looking at young people in special schools. If we look back to the slide a couple of moments ago, there is a large number of young people with SEND in these settings, and also they may or may not have an EHCP, which is an educational healthcare plan, and they may also be vulnerable or disadvantaged, and they may be young carers, refugees, the Gypsy Roma traveller community, looked after children, BAME, disadvantaged children. So when I mentioned that you really need to understand the SEND cohort in your region or area, these are the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about understanding really, really well. What are the numbers? What is the data? Where do those young people go to school, where are they educated, and how can you best support them? So how did we get to where we are now? So of course, I hope that you can see that I feel very passionate about supporting young people with SEND, but it may not have been this way for many of my peers 40 years ago. And in those 40 years, there's been significant developments and legislation relating to inclusion within education. And the terms SEN and inclusion have become intrinsically linked through policy, professional development, personal experience, and public voice. The Education Act in 1981 implemented some suggestions from the Warnock report, and it actually led to children with special educational needs having their rights enshrined in law for the very first time. That was in 1981. Then in 2001, there was a SEN Code of Practice which was revised, and it focused strongly on action, and it recommended that schools adopt a graduated approach through School Action and School Action Plus. And in more recent years, the Department for Education in 2011 stated in the SEN Green Paper that parents believe the system does not sufficiently reflect the needs of their child and their family life. So taking this into account, in addition to the law in the Children and Families Act and the most recent reforms of the SEND Code of Practice in 2015, the government changes provide better opportunities to transform the way children and young people with SEND are educated and supported. And of course, the SEND Code of Practice has gone through multiple revisions, and beyond the code, it now covers the age range of 0 to 25. And this is crucial because this supports the transition to adulthood for young people and ensures that colleges provide courses which are designed to provide pathways to employment for people with SEND. And it also states in the Code of Practice that local authorities should be ambitious for children and young people with SEN and raise their aspirations for the future. So this is all really, really exciting for this sphere that we're in now. And in December 2017, the government published its careers strategy, which some of you may or may not be familiar with on the webinar today. And the careers strategy aims to meet the skills that the country needs on the whole by connecting worlds of education and employment. So in January 2018, the Department for Education expanded on this aim in its statutory guidance for secondary schools. So there now is an expectation for schools to take a strategic approach to the development of their careers provision and should be using the Gatsby benchmark framework. And I mentioned that before, and that really is at the core of a lot of the work that we're doing. So the Gatsby benchmark framework was actually first established by Sir John Holman in the Good Careers Guidance Report in 2014. And it's based on extensive, robust national and international evidence. So the ICANN Careers event that we'll be discussing in a moment was actually planned with the Gatsby benchmarks in mind, and how the event could support our local schools and colleges to work towards achieving these. More recently, the government has revamped their disability confidence scheme, and the Improving Lives Green Paper recognises there is a long way to go to ensure that disabled people and those with long-term health conditions have equal access to the labour market. So, if there ever was more a time to ensure that we're creating and promoting positive career outcomes for young people with SEND, it is now. So I've mentioned those positive career outcomes. What are those? And I also mentioned that SEND Code of Practice focuses on, oops, I'm having a little technical issue here. Bear with me one moment. All right, and we're back. Hopefully everyone can see me. If my colleague Kim can see there's an issue, just let me know. Holla, come off mute. Fab. So I've already mentioned that the SEND Code of Practice includes a focus on a transition to adulthood. And I've mentioned these positive career outcomes. So again, I've mentioned Talentino and the work that they're doing with the Careers and Enterprise Company. And I've actually taken these from their recent SEND Gatsby benchmark toolkit, which I would urge you to look at. And they've also created a same and different model. When you collect these slides at the end of the webinar today, you can click through, the hyperlinks are here. But ultimately, these career pathways have been separated into two strands. Those learners that may not be taking GCSEs and those that will with SEND. So when you're planning your own careers event, it is wise, I would suggest, to ensure that all of these pathways are represented for a fully inclusive offer. Because as I mentioned, one young person with SEND is going to look very different to another young person with SEND, and their outcomes and preparation for adulthood is going to be totally bespoke. So to offer a really truly inclusive event, you need to encompass all of these opportunities. So why is careers education so important? Why does this all matter? We've already looked at the policy change, and the statistics show us that careers education is particularly important for young people with SEND. Nearly 15% of the population have SEND or additional needs, and over 250,000 pupils have a statement of educational needs or an EHCP, as they're now known. And around 1 million pupils have SEND support. So Careers for All really is a social justice issue. We've come so far and we have to keep on making those strides. And a stable careers programme for all young people, including those with SEND, will help to close that gap. I really like this that I'm going to share with you now, and it's actually a longitudinal study of US students with SEND who participated in a careers program, found they had significantly higher earnings 5 years on and were significantly more likely to be employed or on a training program than those who had not participated. So we have the evidence. We know that a stable careers program embedded within secondary schools and colleges can really alter those opportunities for those young people post-education. But it is also very important for young people with SEND. And I think it is more about just those outcomes in terms of a potential career. I feel very lucky to be able to wake up in the morning and have a job that I love going to, and I feel fulfilled because I'm part of the community. And I really do think that that should never be ever different for a young person with SEND. All of the young people that we come in to play with in our everyday lives, whether it be meeting them in the shops or in educational establishments, they too should have those same rights and opportunities as we do. So how do careers fairs fit into all of this? Actually, outside of work experience, studies have found that careers events represent the employer-led career activity most participated in by young people in the UK. And when you talk to many young people and you mention careers education, you probably will get blank looks because it's embedded already within the curriculum. But more often than not, you will meet a young person that has been to a careers fair and they will understand or know what you're talking about when you mention that. And so there is evidence of improved employment outcomes for young people taking part in careers events, for wage premiums and reduced chance of not being in not in education, employment and training. And careers events with employers can have a positive impact on employability skills and educational engagement. And there are lots of other reports such as Motivated to Achieve and some key research findings from education and employers, which I've added on the slide today. And studies have suggested that careers talks are consistently effective and that the careers carousel, that's a term that we're going to come to again, appears to be the most effective activity for supporting students. Now, a careers carousel is a speed networking event involving a rotating group of students and volunteers from business. So traditionally, a careers or job fair usually takes the form of a careers marketplace where you've got 10 or more employers, training providers, universities, and they're often located in a large space at tables with names, job titles, and students walk around to them, ask them about their job, training routes, etc. That's the traditional careers fair that you will have heard of. And you may have also heard of a reverse jobs fair. Now, a reverse jobs fair is an event in which the job seeker is at the center of the event, and their skills and talents are shared with employers in advance so that employers can interact with all the job seekers to get the right match to the organization for paid work or traineeships, for example. And those events often have kind of speed dating elements where you've got job seekers meeting the employers, but those employers already hold information about that job seeker. That's what makes the reverse jobs fair unique to others. Now, I would say that reverse jobs fair are really great for 18 and over. And if you'd like to know more about the reverse jobs fair, the National Supported Employment Forum are leading on some top tips on how to run your own reverse jobs fair. So please do have a look at their website after today. So we're actually now going to unpack how I was able to lead on an inclusive bespoke careers event, which takes all of those learnings and breadcrumbs that I've led for you thus far on what a traditional careers event is, what a reverse jobs fair is. I've taken all of those elements and I created a bespoke careers event called I Can. So what was I Can? So our event I Can as a careers fair began in 2017. And it began by being run by a multi-academy trust of pupil referral units with the aim of creating a welcoming atmosphere for students with SEND, but particularly for SEMH, social, emotional, mental health. And in 2019, the East Sussex Careers Hub were asked to take over the lead of that event. So because of the role that I take within the local authority and within the East Sussex Careers Hub, I said, sure, I'll do it. So I Can 2020 took place at the King's Centre in Eastbourne, East Sussex, and we welcomed 300 vulnerable young people to an all-day careers experience that was specifically tailored to their needs. In the end, we had 27 East Sussex schools and colleges coming along with students aged 13 to 16 from mainstream and SEND specialist organisations. This logo here was specifically designed by myself and our internal comms team. And as 2020 was the first year that the East Sussex Careers Hub were leading on the delivery of the event, it was extremely important for me to think about the main aims of the event. What had gone before? How are we going to build on the reputation of the event? And how are we going to ensure that this event was tailored to the needs of the students who may have barriers to accessing mainstream careers? How was this event going to be different to other careers events? So before embarking on the planning phase of I Can 2020, myself and Kim, who I've mentioned already, we created a survey and we sent that to all our school staff that had taken part in the events before, and we asked for a series of responses to really gauge that we were selecting the event correctly. And if you look at these points on the slide, those were the kinds of things that I wanted to think about. Were the young people going to get the most that they could out of this event? How many young people should we be bringing? What Gatsby benchmarks should we be meeting? Is this a relevant event to embark on? So we actually decided to maintain the name, the date and the location of the event that had come before for continuity. Now, I'm sure that many of you may be running an event for the very first time and may not be in a situation that we were able to build on an event with a reputation. However, the tools that I'm going to suggest now can be utilised for an event that you're running for the very first time, for sure. Now, I worked really closely with our internal local authority comms team to create branding for the event. I really wanted to ensure that we started with a big bang and produced resources and created activities that could be used year on year. And I began to work with my team to expand on the organisations that were involved in the event. And I did this by using our Enterprise Advisor Network. I mentioned that slightly before. And we also in the county have 130 industry champions. It may be more. And industry champions are business volunteers who we've gone out to and selected or asked for support. And they work with schools and colleges up to 3 times a year in promoting careers education. And that is an initiative that can be rolled out in many other areas. It's ultimately ambassadors from the world of work that we speak to regularly about what's happening in our schools and colleges. So we were quite fortunate to have that network already built up. It's part of our role to constantly engage with employers. So when we were planning this, I was really thinking about volume. I was thinking about how to make this as inclusive as possible, to bring in all the schools and colleges, but also not to make this an event which was overwhelming or open or confusing. So we actually decided to ask schools and colleges to bring up to 15 students from Key Stage 4 to the event. And this, I think, helped the teachers and the staff to allocate those 15 students. And in a way, those 15 students felt special that they were chosen for this event. They were chosen to come along to this really inspirational day out, rather than just an event that they could just walk in and out of. We also decided to invite schools to arrive at staggered times throughout the day, again, trying to monitor that volume of traffic of people constantly. And I wanted to really ensure that the day provided meaningful encounters for young people. So I've broken down on the slide those thoughts that were constantly in my mind. But that word meaningful, building meaningful into careers encounters during the planning phase is critical if the resulting encounters are to have the desired outcomes for the pupils and the providers and the employers and all of those supporting those encounters. I would say planning is key. But also thinking about building an evaluation and tracking of participation into the design of your encounters is really key, and not adding this or adding it in as an afterthought won't help you to demonstrate that you've been successful. And I'll be looking at that in more detail with you in a moment. So that one size does not fit all constantly goes through my mind when I think about SEND. And young people with SEND need a personalised careers curriculum. So in turn, with ICANN, we tried to think about making the event as personalised as possible, with a range of opportunities and experiences to meet the needs of a variety of SEND learners. So from a background, oh, I've got a frog in my throat. Hold on a second. There we go. So from a background personally in working predominantly with young people with SEMH, social, emotional, mental health, and also a great resource at my fingers, all of the schools and colleges that we work with the SEND cohort, I began to think about all of this research that I've mentioned thus far, but what were the environmental factors that I needed to consider in planning for this event? If I was creating a careers event which was designed to support young people that did not want to engage with mainstream careers events, how was I going to make ICANN different? How was I going to make it bespoke to their needs? This is an image of one of the spaces at the ICANN careers event. And we were lucky to be able to host this event in a space with lots of additional rooms. So we really played to the space advantage. So instead of those traditional careers fairs with one room full of stalls, I wanted to ensure that learners were taking on a journey, on an immersive and interactive experience. That was key for me. So in 2017, the ICANN Careers event began with 2 rooms for the event. So we decided to build on this, and we actually had a total of 4 rooms, and each of those rooms had a specific theme. So the space also meant that when students arrived in groups, as I mentioned, at staggered times, they could begin their ICANN journey in a particular room, again ensuring that heavy traffic and footfall did not occur. And I'll go on to talk about it in a moment, but each of the groups of students that arrived were met by a volunteer, either from my wider team or from other regions of enterprise coordinators that wanted to support the event. So when you're organizing an event like this, build on your network, build on your support network. So those volunteers that supported the day, they each met one of the schools arriving. So each group of 15 learners with their staff met a volunteer that led them to the room that they would be beginning in. So what were those 4 rooms? The first room was the interactive hall, and that's what you see here. So this was a large and noisy area full of hands-on activities from local training providers, colleges. We had organisations such as STEM UK building robots with young people. We had bag printing with one of the local colleges promoting their courses. And we also had a coding workshop delivered by Microsoft. So you could see that this was a real buzz. There was a real buzz to this room. The other room that we had was called the Careers Hotspot Room. Now, this is a hark back to the careers carousel, which I mentioned earlier. So it's a bit like speed dating, which always makes me feel really weird to say that. But I can never think of a better term to describe what this activity is. So it's ultimately employers and young people meeting for the very first time, sitting down, having a couple of moments to ask questions, feeling relaxed, learning about a sector that you may not have learned before, know anything about, speaking to an employer and discovering training opportunities. We encouraged students to bring along CVs as well. So if they were in that position of applying for jobs rather than courses, they could have that moment to meet and sit with employers in the careers hotspot room. So this was a quieter room with lots of small chairs and small tables. We then had the careers cinema. And it feels as though maybe that seems quite flashy, but actually it was very cheap to put together. You just need a projector, a dark room, lots of chairs and cinema tickets. So young people were given that cinema ticket when they arrived on the day, and they could choose one of 2 videos to watch. So we actually worked with the WOW show. Again, if you haven't heard of them, they've got some amazing resources online at the moment that support careers education. So the WOW show agreed to support us with 2 videos that we could show, and they actually organised subtitles to be put on the videos as well, which was fantastic. So we had one show on the health and social care sector and one on the construction sector. And after each of the screenings, there was feedback or Q&A opportunities from volunteers from each of those sectors. So young people were allowed to engage with employers directly after watching that video. And actually feedback from the volunteers showed that young people were constantly queuing up to come to that cinema. So it was quite a new, exciting experience for them at a careers event. And also the ambassadors from those sectors that were answering those Q&As, they also had tables downstairs in the careers hotspot room or in the interactive hall. So young people could then, if they felt that as though they couldn't ask questions live there and there in front of their peers, they could go and meet that ambassador later on and talk to them on a one-to-one personal basis. So again, further highlighting that sense of a young person going from room to room on a journey, discovering different aspects about their own interests, but also various different types of employer encounters. So again, if you're an enterprise coordinator or a careers lead in the virtual room today with us on the webinar, you may want to think about how each of the rooms meet a different Gatsby benchmark, that framework that I mentioned. And lastly, so I mentioned 3 rooms, lastly, the work ready room. This was a room where students again were allowed to sit down, but they were allowed to sit down with a variety of organisations or training providers for support. So I actually asked all the colleges that were running activities in the interactive hall, I asked them to speak to their student services teams to support the Work Ready room. So if a young person hadn't applied for college already and needed to sit down and complete an application form, they could do this in the Work Ready room. Also, I mentioned that I had enterprise coordinators from other regions come and support, and a few of them were level 6 qualified in careers advice and guidance. So they were able to support in this room with one-to-one guidance. I also worked with some local organisations that support that preparation to adulthood and transition work, and they were all present in this room. So all of those other players, not just employers or training providers, all of those other players, and really thinking holistically about the young person, I asked them to come along to be in this room because it's about the whole journey of that young person to success. So, for example, sensory needs services from the local authority. All of the local authorities should have this service. I asked them to come along and meet with young people that may need additional advice and support. Also, one of the event's sponsors, AXA Insurance, went above and beyond to provide volunteers to support the event, and they actually ran mock interviews with the students. So those volunteers from AXA Insurance, they completed a feedback sheet for that young person, and the feedback sheet was then handed to me at the end of the day. And 2 months later, I sent all of those feedback sheets to their equivalent schools with a package of reflection, lesson plan and resources from the event. So I mentioned already that meaningful process of planning, doing and reviewing. I wanted there to be a clear follow-up and journey of learning after the event. So that really helped that continuous learning. So employer engagement, how did we get the right people at the event? So leading up to the event, we created a 1-hour event preparation lesson and delivered it to 6 of the 27 participating schools. And careers leaders also gave the lesson in 5 other schools. And the lesson plan objectives were to enthuse young people ahead of the event and to ask them in preparing questions to ask employers. We didn't want young people arriving at the event cold, not knowing what to expect. They needed to be effectively prepared. We actually had in total 30 volunteers. It was a day-long event, and the more volunteers we had, I really feel as though that led to the success of the day. So 30 volunteers, they came from numerous departments, the local authority, the SELEP, which is the Southeast Local Enterprise Partnership. And to prepare those volunteers and training providers for ICANN, myself and Kim hosted a pre-event webinar to inform them about who would be present at ICANN. So ultimately a how-to guide for them to support young people on the event and to introduce to them the term SEND. Again, we really wanted to prepare the volunteers, and we also really wanted to prepare the employers and training providers. So we had a separate webinar for them as well. And we also repeated that on the day itself with a morning briefing about what to expect. Again, thinking back to that phrase that I mentioned, once you've met one young person with autism, you've met one young person with autism. This as much is a CPD element or an element, this is a CPD element for staff and employers that we work with as much as it is an experience for young people. So each of the volunteers that I mentioned had a specific role to play during the day, and that may have been supporting the Tombola prize table for young people that had completed their event handbook, or meeting the schools at set times, or having the job of looking for young people that may need support in asking questions. So in the end, we actually had 47 delegates from businesses and education and training providers. And we asked all of the employers to bring interactive elements in order to make young people more likely to approach them. So some of the businesses brought virtual reality headsets, cooking demonstrations, and we had coding workshops. So young people actually signed up to the interviews and the coding session as soon as they arrived on the day. And they engaged in tractor simulators, all of those other interactive elements that I mentioned. Now, the Careers Hub relationship with leading organizations actually helped us to secure those big names for our event. So Microsoft joined via the Digital Skills Partnerships connection with the CELEP, Southeast Local Enterprise Partnership, and the CEO of the WOW Show actually attended the event to see the films being used in a different setting. So I feel as though we are quite lucky in my team, because we do sit in that wider team of supporting skills, education, and employment and training more widely across the county. So that actually means that we are already engaged with the 5 key sectors in our area through specific task groups, which meant that we could promote the event to all of those employers within those task groups. And we constantly encourage that employer engagement through networking opportunities such as Chamber of Commerce, etc. I've mentioned that Kim and I led on this event, but this really is a team effort. You want everyone to know in your team that you're running this event so that they can also be ambassadors for engaging more employers. I would strongly suggest that any blanket emails that you're sending out to training providers or employers to come along to a careers event is followed up with a personalized email and a phone call. And it really helped that I was supported by Kim and another member of the local authority work experience team who works a lot in employer engagement. We both spent a lot of time kind of looking at the representation of employers and training providers that we already had and ensuring that we had an even spread. We wanted to target specific employers from those that we already had. So thinking back to that career progression slide I showed earlier, it's important to ensure all of those possibilities are catered for. I know that cost might come up in the Q&A, and we actually negotiated sponsorship from 2 large employers, AXA Insurance, Healthcare, and Hawes Construction. And that sponsorship actually allowed us to supply all the young people with a canvas bag printed with the ICANN logo and the logos of the 2 sponsors. So the bags were filled with stationery, snacks, careers handout, and other employers donated bits for inside. But more importantly, the bags were given to students upon arrival, and it also contained a handbook for learners to complete during the event. So young people were tasked with visiting several stalls to ask questions of the employers and training providers, and they had to write those answers in their handbook. And we introduced that feature to the young people during the lesson plan. Also, I just want to mention before we go on to resources that during the final hour of ICANN, after school and college groups had departed, we invited parents and young people with SEND or SEMH to attend and bring along their families also, because the day was a closed event by invitation only to support safeguarding. So after all schools and colleges that were pre-booked in have left, we opened it up to parents and carers. So I've mentioned resources. I did create a lot of resources. Some of these resources I've uploaded to the Careers East Sussex website, which I've sent you a link to in the Eventbrite login today. And if you'd like to see more, feel free to email me. So the ICANN lesson plan that had resources. I also designed a reflection lesson plan to be delivered by teachers. There's also a floor plan and ICANN attendance book, evaluations from the day, so different evaluations for different groups of people, an employer briefing book, a volunteer briefing book, and the handbook, which I mentioned. This is the handbook that that we added into all of the bags. So you'll see here, this is just an example of one of the activities in the careers hotspot. I visited employers. They were, place sticker here. Once students completed this, they took it to the tombola table and could win a prize. This also included their pull-out evaluation. If they completed the evaluation, they could enter a bid to win an Amazon prize. So yeah, sometimes you don't want to have those things to lure people in, but this really helped. You can see all the timings here as well. This was actually an A5 size. If I was doing this again, I may look to increase the size of this. We did print some in A4, and I'd probably do that first of in moving forward. These are maps of the rooms. And you can see there clearly listed who's in each room. So from the making it meaningful cycle, which I mentioned before, evaluation really is paramount to a careers event. So in total, we received a total of 278 evaluation forms from students, teachers, providers, etc. And the students completed the evaluations in their handbook, which I mentioned. And I did send out those reflection lesson plans in March with the mock interview sheets and further evaluations. And as you can imagine, it was quite hard to follow up those evaluations due to the current situation that we find ourselves in. So this would be a key evaluator of the event to look at revisiting students and employers that had attended and see whether there'd be any follow-up. So I love some of these figures. It's great. 9 out of 10 students found that ICANN made them feel more prepared for life after school, and nearly all students felt comfortable at the event and enjoyed interacting with the employers. When we first set out to plan this event, we thought about the value, the authenticity, the selection of this event. By hitting that number, we know that we've kind of achieved our goal. But again, I would have liked to have seen further evaluations on the results of those young people moving forward. And I really do think that some of the event's successes were that learners really did take part in new, unique and memorable opportunities. So they completed a personality test with a virtual reality headset, the opportunities to potentially meet work experience hosts. Young people were well prepared and they had clear objectives for the event due to the pre-event prep. Lunch was also provided for employers and training providers, and although we did have schools and colleges arriving after lunch, there were clear designated times, and I really do think those moments of respite for adults supporting the event is really important. And as I've mentioned, employers, training providers and volunteers were well prepared for the event and how to interact with young people with confidence and sensitivity. So to make next year's event even better, what I'd like to do is work more closely with teachers ahead of the event. We've already run it once, we can only build on it now. And I'd like to actually encourage young people to utilise their handbooks even more, because I think it's quite a relatively new tool for young people to have something that they're completing. And I think that could have been better utilised. Also, the parents and carers session that I mentioned previously was an extremely sought after element of the day. However, the timing of it at 4 o'clock was not right. It should not have been at that time. So I will be reviewing the timing of that session, taking into account safeguarding, of course, moving forward. I also had the day run from 9 to 5, and I do think that was too drawn out. So actually, although I really wanted to stagger the arrival of students throughout the day and have it as kind of broken up in terms of volume as possible, I think I would shorten the day to a longer half a day. And again, by making it an annual event, you know that schools are going to bring new students every year. So we really had some fantastic reports and responses from employers, but we actually have an employer with us today. So I'd like to encourage that employer that's with us today to join me now on the call. And that is Matt Wood. So hopefully Matt Wood is with us. I know that he was driving earlier. Is he with us now? He's not with us now, but that's okay. Kim, if Matt joins us in a little bit, would you be able to let me know and we can bring him in for the Q&A?
Yes.
Fab, thank you so much. Now you see all the behind the scenes of planning things. Okay, fab. Brilliant. Now, I did slightly gloss over the situation that we find ourselves in now. Yes, we are coming out of a new environment, a new way of learning, particularly this webinar, for example. We may not have run things like this in the past. It would all be person to person. I do strongly believe that the success of ICANN and an inclusive careers event such as what I've just described to you works the best in person. However, we need to be realistic. We need to think about moving with the times and how we can plan for the future in terms of blended learning, how we can encourage young people to use alternative platforms to have those similar experiences. And there are a lot of organizations around the country that are doing some of those things. So just to name a few, I've added on this slide for you to look at a later date and time. So Launchpad are an organization that supported us on the day with these virtual reality headsets, and they also have the online platform with personality tests and matching you to jobs. But recently in the West Midlands, I think it was the West Midlands, I'm a true southerner, I'm really sorry, it was definitely in the north. They just worked with a local authority in the north to create a week-long virtual careers event. And on the next slide is actually a 2-minute video on how well that event went. And I actually joined into that event. Every day students had different people they could meet to learn about courses in their area. So if you wanted to do something similar to that, I would get in touch with them. National Careers Service recently launched a few virtual careers events through their Facebook platform. Now, as much as that is a brilliant platform and a brilliant service, I would urge you to think about what platforms your young people are using. Are they still using Facebook? Are they using Instagram? Are they using Twitter? What is the accessible technology to them? Cities of Learning in Brighton are doing some really amazing targeted work, again, just with specific schools, but on a much smaller scale. London Careers Festival, equally to Launchpad, just had a week-long careers event. You've got the link there to have a look at. And the WOW show that I mentioned have been producing lots of videos that can be shown by teachers within the classroom setting, and you can encourage live employer engagement within those video sessions also. So there are lots of things going on to help move to a virtual experience. We can cover this at a later date, but ultimately this is about trying to make this in person, how you can make it as inclusive as possible. There are also some really great organizations that support with accessibility and digital inclusion. And if you'd like to find out more about those, please email me afterwards. So this is the video from Launchpad for you to look at later. And I'm going to show you a little video now. Kim, can you just let me know that you can hear that?
Yes, we can.
The children and the young graduates that we've engaged with already showed us that they've got these excellent resources, high-performing skills. They just naturally fit our model, which is amazing.
We don't get confused and worried about what we're going to do. There is a lot more than just bricklaying.
That's what the businesses are here to do, is to actually open young people's eyes to what the opportunities are. And there's a lot of young people who have mentioned particular businesses that they've spoken to that they didn't realise there were opportunities. So young people can hear from their teachers, college tutors about what opportunities are out there. The businesses really are at the heart of inspiring young people.
Often kids soak up information. It's just helping them understand where it is so they can go and find it. And we've got tons of online education around things such as programming. Downstairs they're doing some stuff with the microbits and the programming. It's a great introduction.
Lovely. I hope you liked that little video. Just in terms of GDPR, when students arrived, they were given coloured wristbands upon arrival. So those that had specific colours were allowed to have photo and video taken, and schools and teachers were given photo consent forms before the event. So they actually had to come to the event with those photo consent forms already signed. And we actually had 2 videos that were created, one that lasted for 60 seconds, which is specifically for Instagram use to promote the event for next year. And this one's 2 minutes long, which hopefully can be used in future lesson prep lessons. One thing that Kim and I are already planning, if we can go ahead with this event in person, that is, we would like to encourage a local college to come and do filming and the photography. So that's something that you might want to think about. So I'm going to go back a few slides before we go on to the Q&A. So you've heard me discuss the SEND cohort and why events such as ICANN Careers Event can be so paramount in raising aspirations for young people. And I thought it would be useful to consolidate a few of the top tips for you. So I've put them here, but I've also created an event checklist, which you'll receive after this webinar. So always invite employers that are known as supportive employers. They may already have strong and diversity and inclusivity programs. They already may be employer ambassadors that are linked to your employment and skills department at your local authority. You also want to maybe look at some of those larger employers or local employers with high recruitment numbers, such as the NHS, universities, Health Education England, organisations such as those. It's also important to encourage employers to come along that have entry-level vacancies or live apprenticeships, live work experience opportunities. So you may want to specify with those employers if those opportunities are there ahead of that work. You also want to think about a clear schedule for your day, how to prepare students, how to prepare employers, a diverse range of people there. You want interactive and engaging activities, and you want lots of volunteers. Another thing that I would suggest is identifying everyone at the event. So you may want to do that with t-shirts or lanyards. So if anybody needs any support, they know who to go to. You may also want to think about your signage. Is your signage accessible? Can you access widget or communication in print to show where the toilets are or the exits, for example? Safeguarding is particularly important, so you may want to do a risk assessment beforehand. And those top tips will hopefully be able to support you in getting the best outcomes for you. So your take home, these are things that I've uploaded to the website ready for you. And as I mentioned already, we've now come to the hour stop of the webinar. However, our Q&A is going to roll over ever so slightly. So I do understand if you need to leave today, but if you would like to stay, we now have Matt Wood with us, who was one of our brilliant employers that came along. Matt, I'll just add your face to the screen. And I'd really like Matt to just explore and explain how he felt the experience went for him as an employer.
Okay, can you hear me? Hi Henny, nice to see you finally. Sorry, that was completely I clicked on the wrong link, totally my mistake. I've been watching it since about 10:10, so thank you for that. It's really, really good. Yeah, from my point of view, this is the first one we had attended. It was out of our area. We're based in Surrey, so we moved down to East Sussex. But it was an amazing event, and I'm not just saying that because Hen and her team are on the call. It was an amazing event. We're a fire engineering company, so we go to our traditional exhibitions and we exhibit our trade and services and products. So this is really a sort of out of our comfort zone. So this was the first one we had done. We had a ton of brief from Henny and her team. We were informed, we were filled in, we were briefed beforehand, we were engaged with during. Henny and her team worked the room extensively. They didn't just hide off behind some coffee bar, and they kept us engaged. They brought the students and the young people to us. They made sure that they understood what we were trying to get over, so they could engage with the young people as well. And actually, we found it tiring but enjoyable, thoroughly enjoyable. It was a long day, but a really engaging day, a really worthwhile day for myself and my assistant Sam to give up our day, drive down to the East Sussex, and then take part in the event. It was a long day. I think Henny's mentioned that before. So it was a long day, but what a great way to use the day. And actually, it was well managed as well with the timings and the employers who were looked after food wise, and things like, providing extension leads because, ours was too short, and that was our mistake. So things like that, really, really good engagement with everybody who was there. So yeah, we'll be putting ourselves forward for the next one, hopefully, if we're invited. We got some great feedback from the students as well. We didn't actually take on anyone on that day from that area, but since then we have engaged with 2 young people specifically with SEND, and they are now starting to work with us as soon as we come out of lockdown. So that was definitely on the plan for this year. I think the careers event pushed us forward, made us a little bit more confident than we are, and kind of ring fence the notion of it. So thanks very much. It was a really good day, and sorry for all the IT earlier.
No problem. Thank you so much, Matt. That was fab. I'm going to ask, and also, I mean, if anybody and everybody could have a Matt in their area, it would be amazing. But I think it's really clear to see that when you engage well and you support employers, there's a two-way relationship that's going to happen, of course, because you are now finding future employees that are really well suited for your place of work, which may not have been a solution or an opportunity to you before. So it really is key to work with all of those employers in your region. Now we are over our webinar time, as I mentioned, but I'd like to take this opportunity to answer any questions, either to myself as the enterprise coordinator, either to Kim Bolgen, who helped organize this event, or either to Matt Wood as an employer. So I'm going to ask Kim or Wendy to read out any questions and unmute themselves.
Hi Henny, it's Wendy. I'm going to ask the questions. So I've got quite a few for you, and I'll say they're to you unless they're different, and then I'll make sure I mention them to Matt or Kim. So the first one is just for you to clarify, Henny, that you'll be sharing the slides of this presentation and also the recording.
Yes, so I'll be sharing the slides this week, and the recording will go up on our YouTube channel in 3 weeks' time.
Brilliant, thank you. And then we've got a question from Joanna. So Joanna asked, we have stopped our traditional careers fairs because the employers, colleges, etc. find them a waste of time. Students just usually want a free pen, etc. They usually don't ask many questions, and most of their questions would be answered on the website. So is it worth me trying again?
I would urge you to do so. I think what was some great verbal feedback on the day is actually the event took place in January. Now we know that from September, you're already working with students to think about where their next September guarantee is going to be. However, even in January, you've got young people that have applied for a college course to start in September, but they've only applied out of kind of necessity to have somewhere to go. It might not necessarily be the right fit. So in order to reduce our NEET numbers, our numbers of young people not in employment, education or training, that fit really needs to work. And they may not know about opportunities such as supported internships. And these events bring in all of those other different courses that potentially the careers lead at a specific school might not have encouraged those young people to seek out those opportunities. And we had that feedback from teachers that met employers or sectors or organizations that they'd never heard of before. So actually this is as much for those young people, but also those adults that are helping those young people to make those decisions about next steps. And I think it goes back to that prep that's key. It is going to be an event where young people come and collect pens. I mean, I love a freebie, but it needs to be more than just that. And that's what we tried to do with the handbook, so that it encouraged discussion. And so a lot of the volunteers went around and they used the handbook as a conversation tool. How's your handbook going? You've got one more section to complete, then you can go and enter the Tombola prize. Come on, let's go and speak to an employer, get your sticker. So yeah, how do you feel, Matt, about that? I know that you've been to quite a few careers events.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The careers event for young people is completely different to an industry-led expo, for example. So one of the things we did, I don't know if you remember, hopefully yours is still working, but we really thought about our giveaways. So we spent a few months thinking about giveaways in general, and then when the event came up, we thought, well, let's apply the giveaways to the young persons. What do they really want to take away with them? What would encourage them to maybe go on the website after the event? So we gave away the remainder stock of our smartphone battery packs, because what young person doesn't want to keep their smart device going? Things like that. So a pen, is that going to be engaging? Maybe. A sticky thing? Maybe. A smartphone charger, definitely engaging. And we actually used that to make sure that we engaged with them, and then we got their attention. We spoke about what we did for a living and how that could apply to them. And then when they had been kindful enough to listen and pay attention, then we gave them the giveaways, rather than them just walking the room and collecting their bag full of sweets and pens and stuff. So it was really about us thinking about the young people that were attending and what would be interested, what's in it for them as well, as from that point of view.
Yeah, and I think also in answer to that question, that's why you really have to think about the activities that are on offer. So Matt's stall, for example, I think he mentioned they had an activity looking at a different alarm system and how that worked. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, we were fully interactive. Yeah.
And then, but also, some employers didn't have really interactive activities. So actually they wanted to be in the careers hotspot room and sitting on a table. And I mean, I know from being on the other side of a table at a careers event, standing there all day, it can be tiring for the adult. So what young person wants to talk to a tired adult that's not really feeling enthusiastic at all? So actually it's about making sure that everyone is doing something that they feel inspired by. So I hope that answers the question. So yeah, try again. Have we got another question, Wendy?
Yes, we have. So we've got, with COVID-19, this was an anonymous question. With COVID-19, what suggestions do you have for social distancing with events? I still want the atmosphere to be engaging and not too regimented. Is there a bespoke CIAG delivery programme for SEND/ESOL or SEMH? Or can you signpost guidance to support delivery to those cohorts? So there's two parts. One about social distancing. That's the first part. And the second part is there any bespoke kind of delivery program or guidance to help?
I'll start with the latter half of that question. So in the first instance, I would look at the Send Gatsby toolkit, which I have added a link to in the slides earlier on. There are loads of resources within that, and there are also lots of examples of best practice of how a stable careers program can be really effectively built within that Send setting. So I would have a look at there in the first instance. There are a lot of other organisations that come and support CEIG in special schools. So Talentino offer that support, but it's paid for, and there are other organisations that do similar things. But I think also, if you are in a region, I'm not sure who came up with that question, if you are in a particular region that has a careers hub or an enterprise coordinator, go and link with them and see how they can support those special schools in your area. And the COVID response, for ICANN, yeah, Kim and I are in regular discussions about this. I think what worked as well with ICANN were the events that students could apply for or kind of book into prior to the event. So we might do something like that, where you have more staggered arrival times, more young people coming at specific times. We might also encourage young people to do a week-long virtual event like Launchpad. So I would look to them to develop something bespoke for your area. Thank you, Wendy.
Okay, we've got some more questions. Could you give me, this is an anonymous one, could you give me an idea of how big a team was behind this and the sort of distribution between volunteers and paid staff?
Yeah, so in terms of taking the lead and organising the event was myself and Kim. And also I mentioned one other person, Ryan, who is from our work experience team. So he didn't help in the first planning of the event, but because he's an employer engagement officer within the work experience team, he came in just to support with some of those emails and calls to employers. But very much on the day, it was a lot of volunteers that were using that day to help with their own professional development and also just to be a part of something that was exciting and different. So they volunteered their time on that specific day. But in terms of paid staff that were organising this whole event, it was myself and Kim. And also we have other roles that we take part in. So this wasn't the only thing that we were organising. And again, I mean, we have a massive spreadsheet. I'm sure I can share the spreadsheet with anyone that wants it and take out all of the content. But I've mentioned in the to-do list or event checklist that forward planning is totally key. Get yourself a Gantt chart. I never say it right. Think about when you need to do things by. Prepare emails in advance. You've got these resources here that I've already created, so you can just tweak those and use them yourselves.
Okay, and Alvina and Joanna have asked a similar question, which is always comes down to this, but basically, how much did it cost?
Yes, so a lot of the funding for the event hire came from the Careers Hub. So a pot of money that we have towards improving Gatsby benchmark scores within our region. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we had sponsorship for tools and equipment and resources on the day. And I don't have that figure off the top of my head, but I can come back to you with that at a later date if you email me separately.
Okay, so Nikki's question was specifically about the sponsorship. So if you'd emailed Henny directly, she can answer that for you. Matt, we have a question.
Sorry, Wendy, just very quickly, with the canvas bags and some of the other sponsorship opportunities, it's a good idea to think about what the budget is in the first instance and then go out to the potential sponsors. So I already had a cost of bags, I already had a cost of food and the event hire, etc. Then you can go out to sponsors and suggest how much are you offering or could support to go towards this amount.
Okay, and Matt, there's a question for you from Lucy. Lucy asks, what made you take the leap into attending the event as you hadn't considered SEND recruitment prior to that?
A great question. Yeah, so So we became a disability confident committed, which is the old 2 ticks system, a year ago, and then we moved on to becoming a disability confident employer. And it was really to take our journey further. With becoming a disability confident employer, we were committed to engaging with anyone with a disability, but actually we strived to become more aware, and we've just immersed ourselves in doing more things along this route. So this was a natural fit for us, because we're new to the SEN world, we're new to the disability confident world, and as an employer, I wanted to look for cost-effective ways of taking on apprentices. We were looking for apprentice engineers, to be fair, rather than going down the traditional route of using recruitment firms and going on LinkedIn and stuff like that, which has its pros and cons. This was a try before you buy concept for us, and actually it's now become part of our recruitment model. Because with attending events like this, it's a reasonable cost. It's loads of interaction. It's loads of exposure and PR. It's a sort of a targeted audience. And actually, if you get 1 or 2 young people who engage with you afterwards, and they end up coming online as young engineers, then that's great. We've hit our target with no recruitment costs. So it's brilliant. It's a win-win, absolute win-win.
Okay, thank you for that, Matt. Some other questions we've got. Sam asks, are there any tips for the planning or preparation and supporting the event for learners with PMLD?
So yeah, good question. I didn't specifically mention that, but actually what we try to encourage those schools with PMLD learners to do is to come at the latter half of the day, where it was a lot quieter. We had a lot more bookings of schools wanting to bring their students in the first half of the day. So, of course, when I mentioned SEND as this broad term with lots of groupings within it, we actually wanted to ensure that we had potentially certain schools at times with other certain schools, and you can imagine how you would do that yourselves, and then the quieter part of the day after lunch for those learners with PMLD.
Okay, and I think you might have answered this, but I think somebody said they had trouble getting in at the start. So could Nikki just ask how many schools attended, and also how long in advance did you start the planning for the event?
So 27 schools attended, and some of those were independent schools as well. And we started planning quite a few months in advance, potentially 8 months in advance. So for ICANN 2021, Kim and I have already had initial thoughts about an event or event location already, and we've sent out a save the date flyer, but nothing else. That's the extent of the planning that we've done for next year. But of course, for next year, there's a lot less planning to do unless we have to take it virtual, which I think we probably will do. But in terms of all the resources, those sometimes take quite a lot of time. We've got all of that already in our bank, so we can just adapt that for next year. That will take a lot less time.
Okay, and do you think January is the best time of the year to run the event?
We ran it in January because it had been run in January beforehand, and generally terms 1 and 2 are quite busy, and then you've got March, which is National Careers Week. It could be done then as well, but we felt as though January was quite a quiet time in terms of what else was happening across our region in terms of taking students out. So some schools were doing mocks at that time, so I would definitely encourage you to make sure that that doesn't happen. But yeah, I think we would continue to do it at that time of year.
Okay, and just to follow up on Matt's one, Matt, Lucy has said that you mentioned cost effective. Was there a charge for the employers to attend?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think so. From a cost effective point of view, it was the planning, the preparation, the getting our expo stuff down there, taking a day out for myself and my assistant. So there was a cost. There's a relative cost to that, but and then there was, you know, the goodies and the giveaways. So yeah, I mean, I don't think you charged us, Henny. I don't think so.
No.
So
we gave you free coffee and lunch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So from a cost point of view, it's an involvement cost. It's taking time out. You have to prepare for it as well. So, you know, a couple of days in advance, we went through everything, made sure everything was working, made sure everything was right. So there is an element of cost in that, but it's a relative cost rather than an invoice and a receipt.
Yeah. Brilliant. And also, do you think that the ICANN event principles can be adapted to local/school-based level?
Definitely. Yeah, and actually we have a program called Open Doors, which Kim leads on in the month of November, and this year we're running that virtually. But last year we actually worked with Gatwick Airport and had a large day-long event with Gatwick Airport at one secondary school, and lots of other schools came to that school, and there was a large kind of careers fair with lots of different activities with volunteers from Gatwick Airport. So it was very interactive, very similar to some of the activities that we produced. I think the best thing about bringing in employers to one specific central place such as ICANN is then you have a spread of young people from across the county. So I would potentially, if you were running it at one school, you could open it up to bring in other learners from other areas, other schools, to make it a bit more inclusive.
Okay, I think I've got 3 more. One is not really a question, but just to say that there is some government advice around events and social distancing, which if you haven't got the link, Henny, then we have, and we'll share it, and then you can add that in for people to have. So that is on, I know it's on the government website, but we'll send people the link. So that's one thing that somebody wanted to say. And also, I think this is a quick question from Joanna. You advise having a separate event then for SEND students?
So we already have quite a few mainstream careers events in East Sussex and around East Sussex. You know, we have the brilliant Big Bang, which of course should be quite familiar to a lot of people. And then there are some other larger careers events. But the thing about ICANN, the reason it was created in the first place is because a lot of the learners from the SEMH or pupil referral unit schools that set up the event, their learners did not want to go to those mainstream events. They walked in, walked straight out, they didn't engage. So they needed to create that experience. So I think someone just asked a question about making an event like this specific to one school. That's how ICANN started. And then they started inviting other groups of people, such as home educated, looked after children. And often those are the learners that get missed out of coming to larger, big mainstream events. So yes, I didn't sell this event as an event for SEND learners when I spoke to young people. When I spoke to adults and employers, we kind of used that term, a bespoke SEND careers event. However, for young people that were attending, they weren't attending an event for young people with SEND. They were attending a bespoke careers event.
Okay, and then I think you've kind of answered these, but these all have the same thread going through. So I'll just say them all together. They are all about the kind of virtual world, really. Yep. So running a similar event virtually that's accessible for those with SEND has come from a couple of people. Other people saying we're having trouble getting engagement with virtual events, especially kind of year 11 who felt that they left in March. Any advice on kind of that side of it? So really it's that virtual question, and maybe, you know, have you got any thoughts about how you might do that if you have to go virtually?
Yeah, I think the best results are seen when a young person is supported by an adult or a staff member to access those virtual activities. Of course, we've seen in the last couple of months lots of kind of Learn Live, Wow Show, loads of things going on, happening online. But that means that that young person has to have the energy to go on themselves to a device that they may not or may have, and actually log on and learn about something on their own accord. And we can't assume that all young people are going to do that. And that's exactly the whole ethos of the ICANN careers event. We just expect young people to go up to an employer and say, hi, my name's Henny and I'm really good at this. Do you have a job? We need to continue to support young people. That's why we're here as educationalists. So I would say that in order for virtual experiences to have the biggest impact, it needs to be facilitated within a school or college setting. So you've got students in the classroom and you've got an employer that's live on a big screen and the teacher is facilitating that conversation. I think that's where it would work the best.
Okay, and did I ask this question, because I think I've got to the near enough the last one, did I ask you about Lucy asking whether you mixed the schools attending or kept them separate?
No, but I think I may have answered that already. We had groups arrive kind of at 9:30 and 9:40, 9:50, and we did speak to specific schools and say, do you want to come at this time so that you're not at the same time as another school? And really it was down to the individual school. So those volunteers that met each school, they would just make sure that those schools were okay. If they needed anything, there was a volunteer to help them. But it was down to the school staff. Did they want their young people to go around the event as a group or on their own? So young people were encouraged to kind of take that more mature elements to arriving at the event, to go and learn about things themselves, depending on their staff that was with them.
Okay, so just to finish off, obviously a couple of things have gone in the chat. So some details about Council for Disabled Children showing about each area and what details there are happening in that area. And also Louisa's posted up the National SEND Employment Forum link. And also Rachel has said how inspirational it's been this morning. And so the last kind of question that we have is to ask, so both of you could do it, but Matt, if you had one kind of positive takeaway that you remember from the event, the ICANN event, that inspirational kind of light bulb moment, what would that be for you?
I would say that the light bulb moment was the I know it's really cliche, but the young people are our future, and if you start engaging with them now, it might be a little bit too late to get them to think about their careers in your particular industry, but actually you might just strike a chord with that one or two individuals, and by working at them now at events like this, you're much more likely to get that engagement later on in their future life, rather than trying to convince somebody who's already in their adult working careers.
Brilliant. So that's the last questions that I have that have been sent to me, Henny. So I don't know if you just want to finish off. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you, Kim, for being on the call. Thank you so much, Matt, for being wonderful and joining us. And thank you all for signing in and joining me this morning to hear about some of these top tips. I am more than willing to share our best practice or learn from you as well. So feel free to email me. Thank you very much for joining us today, and have a wonderful day wherever you are.